For 6 long years, Emma lived in the shadows of her past. Once, she had loved a man who promised her the world, only to vanish when success called his name louder than her voice. Alone, she carried the weight of 2 little hearts, raising them through sleepless nights, empty pockets, and silent tears. Her sons knew nothing of their father, only that their mother worked harder than anyone else they'd ever seen. But fate never forgets. One cold autumn morning, the man she once loved, Alexander Knight, the ruthless millionaire CEO, he thought he had everything until he saw 2 boys with his same storm gray eyes standing at her side. They didn't call him father, they didn't even know his name, and yet, one look shattered the walls around his heart. Because in their faces, he saw not strangers, he saw himself. The city never slept, and neither did Alexander Knight. The world knew him as a ruthless millionaire CEO, a man who built empires from glass towers and signed deals that left competitors trembling. He was polished, untouchable, and perfectly controlled. Every hour of his life was measured in profit margins and boardroom victories. To anyone watching, he had it all. But Alexander carried one secret the world didn't know. He had once loved a woman named Emma Hayes. She had been the only person who saw him not as a title, not as a rising tycoon, but simply as a man. She had laughed at his arrogance, challenged his certainty, and believed in him before his empire even existed. But 5 years ago, when success demanded sacrifices, Alexander had made the cruelest one. He walked away from her. Emma had begged him to stay that night, her eyes wide with fear and a trembling secret on her lips. But Alexander had convinced himself he didn't have time for love, or family, or anything that distracted him from climbing higher. He never heard what she wanted to say. He never turned back. And for 5 years, he lived as though she had never existed. Until now, it was supposed to be an ordinary morning. Alexander was on his way to a meeting when the world shifted. Outside a small neighborhood cafe, he saw her, Emma. Her auburn hair was tied back hastily, strands falling into her tired face. Her clothes were simple, worn, but her presence was undeniable. She carried herself with quiet strength, even as her shoulders sagged beneath the weight of something he couldn't yet see. And then he saw them, 2 boys. They stood close to her side, each clutching one of her hands. They couldn't have been more than 5 years old. One had a stubborn frown as he studied the ground. The other looked at everything with wide, curious eyes. But both had Alexander's storm gray gaze staring out of their small faces. His breath caught in his throat. Emma turned at that moment, and for the first time in years, their eyes met. Her expression hardened instantly. She didn't gasp, didn't falter, didn't even let surprise cross her face. She just straightened her shoulders and pulled her sons closer, like a shield. Alexander froze. His polished composure, the armor he wore in every boardroom, cracked at the edges. He could have dismissed it as coincidence, but his heart told him the truth before his mind could catch up. They were his sons. The cafe door swung open, and Emma guided the boys inside without a word. For the first time in his life, Alexander Knight followed not out of control, but out of desperate, unanswered need. Inside, the cafe smelled of warm bread and fresh coffee. Emma slid into a booth, settling the boys on either side of her. Alexander hovered, unsure, until one of the boys looked up directly at him. "Mommy?" the child asked in a small voice. "Who's that man?" Emma's jaw tightened. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she met Alexander's eyes, a silent storm raging in them. "He's nobody," she said finally, her voice steady but sharp as glass. "Just nobody." The words cut deeper than any rejection Alexander had ever faced. He had been called ruthless, arrogant, heartless by enemies and competitors alike, but never nobody, not to her, not when he saw his own reflection staring back at him from those children's faces. Alexander sat down across from them before Emma could protest. "Emma," he said, his voice lower, less controlled than he intended. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," she replied, brushing crumbs from the table with trembling fingers. "You made your choice 5 years ago. We survived without you." His eyes flickered to the boys, who were busy unwrapping muffins the waitress had set down. "Emma," his throat tightened. "They're mine, aren't they?" For a moment, her mask slipped. Pain flickered across her face, followed by exhaustion. But then she set her jaw, meeting him with unflinching resolve. "You don't get to ask that," she whispered. "Not after the way you left." Alexander's hand curled into a fist on the table. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, to claim ignorance. But deep down, he knew she was right. He had left. He hadn't even given her the chance to speak that night. Still looking at those Boise sons, something inside him cracked open. All the boardrooms, all the money, All the victories suddenly felt meaningless compared to the sound of one of them laughing as crumbs fell down his shirt. For the first time in years, Alexander Knight felt powerless. And for the first time, he didn't hate it. The silence between them was unbearable. In the cafe, laughter and clinking cups filled the air. But at their small table, every sound seemed heavy, stretched thin by years of distance. Emma broke it first. "You shouldn't be here, Alexander." Her voice was quiet, but it carried enough sharpness to slice through his chest. He leaned forward, his storm gray eyes never leaving hers. "I didn't know, Emma. I swear, I didn't know." Her laugh was soft and bitter. "Of course you didn't. You were too busy chasing skyscrapers and headlines to look back." The boys glanced between them, sensing tension though not understanding it. Emma softened immediately, handing them straws for their juice boxes, tucking a stray curl behind one of their ears. Alexander watched the small, tender gestures and felt something twist violently inside him. How many moments like this had he missed? How many birthdays, scraped knees, bedtime stories? "Emma," he tried again, lowering his voice. "Please just tell me the truth. Are they mine?" Her eyes shimmered, but her chin lifted. "Does it matter? You weren't here. You didn't want to be." The weight of her words slammed into him. He wanted to argue, to say that he hadn't known, that he had made his choices for ambition, not because he didn't care. But he realized how hollow those excuses would sound. She had been alone. She had carried the weight of 2 children while he had carried nothing but his pride. "They look like me," he whispered, almost to himself. Emma's gaze softened for the briefest moment, then hardened again. "Yes, every day I look at them and see you. Every day I wonder if that's why life made it harder. Because I was foolish enough to believe you'd stay." The boy on her left tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, is he mad at you?" Emma shook her head quickly, forcing a smile for her son. "No, sweetheart. Finish your muffin." Alexander's throat burned. He had faced shareholders, enemies, rivalsmen twice his size, and women who could destroy his empire with a single deal. But nothing terrified him more than the thought of those children believing he was angry with their mother. He cleared his throat. "I'm not mad," he said softly, looking at the boy. "Not at all." The child studied him curiously, then returned to his muffin. The innocence of it shattered Alexander even further. They didn't know him. They didn't even know who he was. Emma stood abruptly, collecting napkins. "We're leaving." Alexander shot up. "Wait please, Emma. I can't let you walk out again." She paused, her back straight, her shoulders tense. "You don't get to decide that anymore." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a card, but she waved it away before he could offer it. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't think you can buy your way into their lives." His jaw clenched. He had built empires by buying everything. Influence, power, silence, it all had a price. But for the first time, money meant nothing. "I don't want to buy them," he said, his voice breaking despite his effort to keep it steady. "I want to know them." Emma froze, her hands tightening on the boy's shoulders. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she turned slowly to face him. Her eyes were tired, lined with years of quiet battles. But there was a strength in them that humbled him. "You walked away from me," she said, "but you don't walk away from them. If you step into their lives, you stay. Do you hear me? You stay." Alexander nodded instantly. "I'll stay." Emma searched his face, as though testing the truth of his words. Finally, she exhaled, her shoulders sagging under a weight she had carried too long. "All right," she whispered, "but you don't get to hurt them the way you hurt me." Her warning cut him deeper than any deal gone wrong. He wanted to promise her everything, to swear that he would never let those boys down. But he knew words weren't enough anymore. He had to show them. He had to prove it. The boys finished their muffins, oblivious to the storm brewing above their heads. One of them yawned, and Alexander instinctively reached across the table to steady the juice box tipping dangerously close to spilling. The boy blinked up at him and whispered, "Thanks." That single word lodged in Alexander's chest like a seed of hope. Emma gathered the boys, preparing to leave. This time, Alexander didn't stop her. He only asked, quietly, "Can I walk you home?" She hesitated, then nodded once. Just this once. They stepped out into the crisp autumn air, the boys skipping ahead, leaves crunching beneath their small sneakers. Emma walked beside them, her hand brushing theirs every few steps. Alexander walked on the other side, uncertain, feeling both like an intruder and a father. For the first time in years, the man who had everything felt the weight of what he had lost. And for the first time, he understood what truly mattered. The walk home was short, but for Alexander, it felt like miles. Every step beside Emma and the boys peeled away the layers of the man he had become: the CEO, the tycoon, the ruthless negotiator. What remained was something raw, unfamiliar, and terrifying. A father who had already lost too much time. Emma's small house stood at the end of the street. A modest place with peeling paint and flowers struggling to bloom in cracked pots. Nothing about it resembled the glittering world Alexander lived in, but it radiated warmth he hadn't felt in years. As the boys rushed ahead to open the door, Emma lingered on the steps, turning to face him. "This doesn't mean you're part of their lives," she said firmly. "It just means you walked us home." Alexander nodded. "I understand." But as the door closed behind her, leaving him standing outside, he knew understanding wasn't enough. He had to earn it. Days turned into weeks. For the next few days, Alexander couldn't focus. Boardroom meetings blurred, numbers on contracts lost meaning. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw two boys with his eyes laughing, running, asking questions he had no answers for. He began showing up, not at Emma's door uninvited, but at the edges of their lives. He asked her if he could pick the boys from school one afternoon. She hesitated, then allowed it. He arrived in a sleek car that turned heads, but when he saw his sons waiting at the gate, their backpacks nearly tipping them over, he suddenly wished he had walked instead. The boys eyed him with curiosity. One of them, the quieter twin, asked, "Do you always wear suits?" Alexander chuckled for the first time in years. "Not always. Would you like to see me in something else?" Both boys nodded eagerly. And so, the next day, the powerful CEO showed up in jeans and a t-shirt, looking more like a clumsy giant than a billionaire. The boys laughed so hard they nearly toppled over. And Alexander felt something in his chest loosen. He began helping Emma where he could, though she never asked. Fixing the broken fence, carrying groceries, sitting in the small kitchen while the boys did their homework, quietly marveling at their questions, their quick laughter, the way they fought and made up in the span of seconds. Emma watched him with cautious eyes. She had built walls high and strong, but piece by piece, he was learning where the cracks were. The breaking point: one evening, the boys had a school recital. Emma dressed them in their best clothes, nerves lighting up their little faces. She hadn't invited Alexander. She didn't think he'd care. But when she walked into the crowded auditorium, she saw him already there, sitting in the middle row, clutching flowers awkwardly in his hand. Her breath caught. He had come, not because she asked, not because anyone expected it, but because he wanted to. The boys spotted him from the stage. Their faces lit up like stars. In that instant, Emma knew no matter how much she wanted to protect them, they already saw him. He was already a part of their world. After the recital, the boys ran into his arms, babbling about their performance. Alexander held them tightly, blinking back tears he couldn't hide. Emma stood a few feet away, her heart twisting painfully. Later that night, when the boys were asleep, Emma finally spoke to him outside her house. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with exhaustion. "Because I can't undo the past," Alexander admitted, his eyes raw with honesty. "But I can fight for the future. For them? For you." Emma shook her head. "You left me when I needed you most. How do I trust you now?" He stepped closer, his voice low. "Not with words. I'll prove it with time. If it takes years, I'll wait. I'll be here, Emma. Not as a CEO, not as the man who broke you, but as their father. And as the man who still," he paused, his throat tight, "still loves you." Tears shimmered in Emma's eyes, but she looked away. "Love doesn't feed children, Alexander. Commitment does." "I know," he whispered. "And I'm not walking away again." A new beginning. Weeks turned into months. Alexander kept his promise. He showed up for soccer games. He helped with school projects. He sat at Emma's table on rainy evenings, learning what it meant to be present. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments. Old wounds reopened. Emma struggled to let go of the bitterness. And Alexander fought against the habits of a man who once put ambition above everything else. But slowly, painfully, they began stitching a new life together. One night, as the boys fell asleep on the couch after a movie, Emma found Alexander watching them, his expression unguarded. "They're incredible," he murmured. Emma folded her arms. "They're strong because they had to be." He turned to her, his voice soft but steady. "And I want to make sure they never have to be strong alone again." Something in her heart cracked at that. For years, she had carried everything on her shoulders. Seeing him finally step forward, not as a stranger, not as a CEO, but as a father, was a weight she didn't realize she could set down. She didn't forgive him all at once. But that night, when Alexander carried one boy to his bed and tucked the other in with a gentleness that surprised even him. Emma allowed herself a fragile hope. Maybe, just maybe, survival didn't have to be her story anymore. Maybe it could be about healing, about family, about love rediscovered in the faces of two little boys who had brought their father home. She had survived without him, but now for the first time she wondered if life had given them all a second chance, not to survive, but to truly live.